In this video, we're going through my tight end rankings for the 2024 draft class. Outside of my number one tight end, it's not a great class in terms of day two talent, but there are a lot of enticing mid-round options that offer some different skill sets and I think can find roles in the NFL. Here's the list of the tight ends that I haven't watched. I don't really see myself getting into any of these players. I've heard some good things about Mason Pline out of Furman, but at this point, I've got 20 tight ends graded, and I think I'm probably gonna stick to that. As someone with limited cooking skills, I've always struggled to find healthy meals that taste good and don't take a long time to prepare, but Factor helps me avoid takeout and ordering in with delicious and nutritious, no-nonsense food that's ready quickly. Their meals come pre-prepared, ready to eat in 2 minutes, which is perfect for busy lifestyles. And if you want to try this out, head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code ATOZFilm50 and get 50% off your first Factor box and free wellness shots for life. 2 free wellness shots from 3 available flavors for every order while you're an active subscriber. My 20th ranked tight end is Isaac Rex out of BYU. I only watched his 2023 tape and a couple games from 2022. Looking at his box score, he was actually more productive early in his career. He had 12 touchdowns back in 2020, but I didn't really see much upside with Isaac Rex. He struggled to really separate. His routes are stiff and gradual. He's not a threat after the catch. He's got good size. He's 6'5", does have really short arms, but he's an average run blocker for his size and very disappointing catching in traffic. He actually only caught 1 of 11 contested catches this year, so maybe he gets back to 2020 form. I don't really see it happening. My 19th ranked tight end is Austin Stogner out of Oklahoma. He's very big, but that's pretty much all he has going for him in my opinion. He projects as a blocking specialist, but his blocking tape wasn't that impressive. He's lacking in speed and separation ability. Most of his receptions were just dump offs or like designed leak routes. So Austin Stogner is an undrafted free agent grade for me. I've got 4 priority free agents. Tight end 18 is going to be Jack Westover out of Washington. He had some okay production last year. He's got reliable hands. He's a decent route runner in terms of technique and setting up his breaks. I thought his explosiveness out of breaks was just above average. And for a player that's so undersized at 6'2.5", 243 pounds with 32-inch arms, you want him to be a lot more dynamic of a route runner. He gives you very little after the catch. There are so many plays on his tape where he falls down right after he catches the ball and doesn't even try to work downfield. And then he's a competitive run blocker with solid technique, but at 243 pounds, there's just real limitations as far as what he can do in the run game. At 17, I've got South Dakota State tight end Zack Hines. He's a pure blocking specialist, 6'6", 264 pounds. He was playing against weaker competition, but he just dominated the smaller players that he was facing in the run game. But I don't think his run blocking success was purely a result of him overpowering his competition. He actually has really good technique and understanding of running concepts. He does a good job working combo blocks, climbing to the second level, and at his size, I think he's someone that can hold up against defensive ends and bigger outside linebackers. It's hard for me to see him offering too much in the passing game. He's a very clunky route runner. I don't think he has the athletic traits to pull away vertically or separate horizontally. He has good hands and he's able to high point the ball and win contested catches. So if he's your third blocking tight end, he can come in 13 personnel on the goal line and win jump balls in the red zone, but he's not going to be like a featured part of your passing game. At 16, I've got another Washington tight end, Devin Culp. He ran a 4.47 in the 40-yard dash, which is the fastest time of any tight end in this class, 97th percentile, but he did that at 231 pounds, which is 4th percentile for tight ends. So he has elite speed to attack the seams, but with that lack of size comes some very real limitations. And really outside of his speed, there aren't a whole lot of high-end traits or skills with Devin Culp. Unless he adds weight, you really can't trust him to hold up in the run game. It's weird. He's only 6'3", but it seems like he's a lot taller than that on tape, and I don't mean that in a good way. He gets stood up as a run blocker so easily. The lack of power just really limits the role versatility with Devin Culp. And then as a receiver, he is fast. I don't know that the 4.47 speed really shows up on tape. He can separate vertically probably as well as any tight end in this class, but I don't watch him on tape and see him run and think like this is a player that you have to bet on. His other movement skills though are very uncoordinated. He's kind of a high cut player, really struggles to sink his hips and decelerate. They'd have him running 15-yard deep curls and stop routes, and there's a lot of plays where he tries to sink his hips and he ends up stumbling and losing his footing. So I'd take a flyer on him as a priority free agent just for the speed, but the role you're projecting him to develop into is very specialized, and he still has a ways to go to be any sort of contributor. And then final priority free agent at tight end 15 is Trey Knox out of South Carolina. He's a converted wide receiver with arguably the most advanced route running skill set of any tight end in this class. He's able to run some complex routes, blaze outs where he's setting defenders up at the stem. He's got some really advanced footwork in and out of breaks, so you see his route running and you can tell that he was a former receiver, but with his athletic traits, you can also see why he converted from receiver to tight end. Watching his tape back in January, I viewed him as an undersized tight end that's also an average athlete, so that put him firmly as a day 3 grade for me, but he actually tested like a terrible athlete. At 240 pounds, he ran a 4.91 in the 40-yard dash. And just as a preface before we get into the rest of these guys, tight end's probably the position where athletic traits and combine testing matters the most. A lot of tight end routes are just being able to outrun a defender in a straight line, so it's one of the few positions where the 40-yard dash is actually fairly translatable to what they're doing on an NFL field. So yeah, I didn't think Trey Knox was going to be this super explosive athlete, but the 4.91 did cause me to drop him from an early 7th to a priority free agent. And the main area on tape where you see his athletic limitations is after the catch. He's got heavy feet trying to evade tackles. For a hybrid H-back type, you're going to get him a lot of like swing passes and slide routes where he has to make the first defender miss, and I just don't trust that he can do that. And then he's a good run blocker for his size. I think he's got good hand placement and technique, but like I'm going to say with a lot of these players, at 240 pounds, it's just such a mismatch if you're trying to block a defensive end. My 7th round grade is Minnesota tight end Brevin Spanford, who comes in at tight end 14. He's a massive tight end at 6'6.5", 260 pounds, over 33-inch arms, and he's one of the better blockers in this class. He's got flashes of dominance against defensive backs, linebackers, defensive ends. When he has good hand placement into contact, he can just fire into blocks, and he has a rare ability for a tight end to create displacement off the line of scrimmage. I felt like there were times on tape that he was kind of over-reliant on his size and length as a blocker, and he would reach and lean into contact instead of sliding his feet, but overall his blocking tape was very good. The problem with Brevin Spanford is not only are there limitations to what he can give you as a receiver, he's not even someone that I would trust throwing the ball to if they were wide open. He had 9 drops last year on 46 targets for a 26.5% drop rate. That's the highest drop rate for a tight end in PFF's entire database, which goes back to 2014. And it's not like he's a separator that you can talk yourself into feeding targets to. He's got okay speed for a 6'6" tight end, but he's just a pure blocker to me. I don't really see the upside to be much more than that. My 13th ranked tight end is McLaughlin out of Tennessee. He's a transfer from UC Davis, never really had the production that I think his skill set warrants, which is kind of par for the course with tight ends, but he's a very good athlete, especially in terms of straight line explosiveness. Those first 2 or 3 steps off the line of scrimmage, he covers a lot of ground. He has occasional focus drops, but outside of that, incredible concentration at the catch point. He had multiple receptions on tape that were deflected off of a teammate, so another receiver drops the ball, he's able to adjust to it and secure the catch. He isn't the most sudden or fluid route runner, but he shows some good salesmanship to set up his breaks and create separation, and he's a really effective run blocker, especially projecting him into more of an H-back role. He lined up in the backfield a lot in Tennessee's offense, and he showed really good awareness and understanding of his assignments. He has very consistent hand placement into initial contact. He does a good job of striking with force and raising the defender's pad level. I think he does have some limitations as a wide tight end. He only played 13% of his snaps in line at Tennessee, so they were kind of shielding him from some of the more difficult blocking assignments. But as a second move tight end, I think McLaughlin offers a lot of versatility and can add value in both phases, and I think he'd definitely qualify as a sleeper in this class, someone that I expect to get drafted somewhere on day 3. 2023. At tight end 12, I've got Tanner McLaughlin out of Arizona, and something that we say a lot with tight end prospects is that they're going to be better or more productive in the NFL than they were in college, and a lot of times that's true because most college passing offenses aren't as focused on the tight end as NFL offenses are. But with McLaughlin, I kind of fear the opposite. I think he might just be a really good college tight end with limited upside projecting to the NFL. There's so much to like about his tape at Arizona. He's a talented route runner. He does a good job setting up his breaks and shaking defenders at the top of the route. His hands were kind of inconsistent last year, but in 2023, he didn't have a single drop. He made a handful of really impressive full body extension catches over the middle of the field. He does a good job absorbing contact and holding onto the football. He's not the most dynamic tight end after the catch as far as side to side making people miss, but he can hurdle defenders in the open field. He's got a really good stiff arm, decent contact balance after the catch, and then he's only 244 pounds with really short arms, but he really maximizes what he can do as a blocker. He gives maximum effort in the run game. When he's able to connect to a block, he does a good job driving his feet and sustaining. He had multiple reps against linebackers and DBs where he was driving them to the sideline 15 yards down the field. But with tight end blocking, it's really important to make the distinction between blocking linebackers and DBs and blocking front four defenders. There's a lot of undersized tight ends that can win blocks against 240-pound linebackers or defensive backs that are 20 to 30 pounds lighter than them, but they're not going to be able to put up much resistance against a 280-pound five tech. And with Tanner McLaughlin, there are some blocks on the line of scrimmage that he just doesn't have the size or length to win. So with that, you start to project him to more of a move flex tight end role, and I don't really think he has the high-end athletic traits to thrive if you're lining him up in the slot. So he's a really good college player. I just worry that he might not have the size or athletic traits to fit cleanly into any tight end role in the NFL. My 11th ranked tight end is AJ Barner out of Michigan. This is another run blocking specialist with good size and even better technique and effort in the run game. He has consistent inside hand placement. He drives his legs, sustains blocks. He can displace defensive ends. He can climb to the second level, put linebackers on the ground, but I think he has very limited upside as a receiver. And if you're just watching a handful of games, I think your opinion on AJ Barner is going to be very dependent on which games you choose. In the Michigan State game, he looked like someone that could be a true dual threat tight end. He's separating out of his breaks. He's selling a two-way go at the top of the route. He's winning contested catches. He had 249 receiving yards all season. Against Michigan State, he had 8 receptions for 99 yards and 1 touchdown. So if you watch that game, you're going to be a lot higher on his potential as a receiver. And then the Minnesota game was really the only game that he showed anything after the catch. He's juking defenders out in the open field, spinning out of tackles, but in all the rest of his tape, he showed nowhere near that level of receiving ability. He's a labored route runner, rounded breaks, doesn't have great speed, not much of a dynamic skill set with the ball in his hands. And in the draft, you do want to grade the flashes, but ideally those flashes would be spread out over more than 1 or 2 games. I also thought his run blocking kind of declined as the season went on. I watched these games chronologically, and the first 5 or 6 games of the season, he was lights out as a run blocker. Over the second half of the year, he still held up in the run game, and that tape alone would put him as one of the better run blockers in this class, but it was a lot less dominant as the level of competition increased. So I think AJ Barner's just a player where you know what you're getting on day 3. He's going to be a positive run blocker. He can catch the ball on wide open passes, but he's not going to be a central focus of your passing game. My 10th ranked tight end is Dallin Holker out of Colorado State. There's a lot of tight ends in this class that have great hands, but I think Dallin Holker stacks up with any of them. He put every single type of catch that you want to see on his tape last year. He's got long arms and big hands, so he can reach backwards and make difficult one-handed catches outside of his frame. He had, I think, a game-winning touchdown on a Hail Mary that kind of ricocheted into his hands. Against Colorado, you saw his ability to adjust to a low pass at his feet and reach down and basically scoop it off of the ground. On wheel routes and slot fades, he can track the ball over his shoulder, and with all of these, he's incredibly quick transitioning from receiver to runner. There's no delay from him making a difficult catch and then accelerating upfield. But he didn't actually play much tight end at Colorado State. He actually played more snaps at receiver than he did in line. He's kind of built like a fullback, 6'3", 241 pounds, and when he's blocking outside the hashes, he was a decent screen blocker, but when they would put him in line, line. He has real limitations as a blocker based on his size, but also I think his effort level. I try to avoid criticizing effort level unless it's just blatantly obvious, but with Dallin Holker, like, you will see him pull back from contact as a blocker. He doesn't seem to be very willing in that phase. Even if he was, there are still real size limitations. So now you're back to basically projecting him as a slot receiver, and he's just not a great athlete. He ran a 4.78. There wasn't a lot of nuance as a route runner where I feel like he'd be able to separate against safeties and slot corners. He is pretty good after the catch, but I don't think that's enough of a strength where you want to be feeding him targets in an NFL offense. So he's a player that I think could give you something as a complementary piece, but not going to be a full-time contributor. My 9th ranked tight end is Reiman out of Illinois, 6'5", 271 pounds. His tape is very similar to a lot of the blocking tight ends that we've discussed so far, like AJ Barner, Zack Hines, Brevin Spanford. The difference with Reiman is that he tested like one of the best players in this entire class. He ran a 4.64, 96th percentile 10-yard split. He had good numbers in the short shuttle and 3-cone. He has all of the size and run blocking technique as some of these other players. The difference is there's at least theoretical upside that he could develop into more than that. His blocking tape, he looks like a 6th offensive lineman. He can pancake 290-pound defensive ends. He has really good hand placement, strikes with a lot of force, does a good job of sustaining blocks, keeping his feet moving, but he was just a complete afterthought as a receiver. He only has 418 career receiving yards. The movement skills don't really show up as a route runner, and I thought he was disappointing in contested catch situations. He doesn't really play to his size at the catch point. So I think Reiman can be a day one contributor as a run blocker and more of a developmental upside pick as a receiver. My tight end 8 is Jaheim out of Florida State. He's another one of these undersized H-back hybrid tight ends. He's 6'2", 241 pounds, but he runs a 4.61, jumps 35 in the vertical. He's a seam buster with really good straight line speed. He's automatic, creating vertical separation against linebackers, and he's tough after the catch with good contact balance to bounce off of collisions. But for an undersized tight end, I thought he was actually a pretty stiff route runner. You want a 240-pound player to be able to create more separation and have more burst out of his breaks, and he definitely improved as a blocker in 2023. He plays with high effort. He had some impressive blocks out on the move, but again, not someone that you want with their hand in the dirt blocking defensive ends. I think his role is limited to more of a complementary piece. My tight end 7 is Wiley out of TCU. This dude is tall and fast. He's built like a power forward. He's got straight line speed to outrun safeties. He has long arms. He does a great job plucking the ball away from his frame. Only one career drop, so extremely reliable hands. And I actually thought he had some decent snap out of his breaks for a 6'6" tight end. He ran mostly a linear route tree at TCU, so we didn't get to see that as often, but on outbreaking routes, I thought he was efficient changing directions and could definitely run a more diverse route tree in the NFL. After the catch, he gives you pretty much nothing unless it's just running in a straight line and attacking open space. He looks like he's wearing stilts if he's trying to make a defender miss. And then he has potential as a run blocker, but he needs a lot of work and development. He's got to fill out his frame a little bit more and add some play strength, and he needs to be a lot more proactive into initial contact. He's kind of passive with his strike. He lets defenders get into his frame and control the interaction, and as a high cut player, when the defenders get early control, he can get moved backwards. So I really like Wiley. I think he can contribute immediately in the passing game as he develops his blocking skills and becomes more of a 3-down tight end. At tight end 6, I've got Eric All out of Iowa. He's a pretty under-discussed player because he's had 2 consecutive season-ending injuries, but his tape when he is on the field is extremely impressive. He's one of the best route runners and I think one of the best athletes in this class. We're not going to get any testing for him, but you see the smooth strides to create vertical separation, crisp lateral movement skills. He can get in and out of breaks like a receiver, and he's also got some nuance and salesmanship at the top of the route. He had multiple plays on his 2023 tape where he legitimately broke a safety's ankles out of his break. His yak skills are kind of hard to evaluate because he barely plays When he is in the game, Iowa's offense runs like 40 offensive snaps a game, it seems like. They're a very run-heavy team, so he doesn't get that many targets, and when he is targeted, about half of them it felt like were inaccurate. But there were times that he flashed some playmaking skills after the catch, abrupt start-stop ability, some decent contact balance. I think as a receiver, Eric All has a ton of upside, but his blocking is way too erratic. There is some upside there, but at this point, he's a boom-bust, all-or-nothing run blocker. He just kind of lunges into contact. He barely even sticks his hands out and tries to secure the block. That can result in some dominant knockdowns. He had a slice block on Marshawn Nealon where he basically folded him in half, but for every pancake, there's multiple whiffs and just bouncing off of contact, letting the defender make a tackle in the backfield. So his run blocking technique, I think, needs to be completely reworked and built from the ground up. And then he also struggles with focus drops, so there's a couple elements there with Eric All that lead to him being a high upside but low floor tight end prospect. My tight end 5 is Cade Stover out of Ohio State. He's pretty much automatic catching the football, some of the strongest hands that you'll ever see for a tight end. He wins contested catches, he pretty much never drops the ball, he tracks the ball in tight windows. As far as just being a reliable safety blanket target over the middle of the field, Cade Stover offers everything that you look for. He's only 6'4", 247 pounds. He plays a lot bigger than that on tape though. He had the run blocking responsibilities of a true wide tight end, and he was able to hold up in the trenches against defensive ends. He could definitely improve his footwork and get better at sustaining blocks, but I think his effort and technique overall will take him a long way. I raised his grade some after the combine. He ran a 4.65. I thought on tape he was very slow, and you see him struggle to pull away from linebackers down the seam. I still don't think he's going to be someone that creates a ton of separation in the NFL, but as a steady, reliable presence over the middle of the field, I like Cade Stover on early day 3. We're now into the top 100, and I've got 3 tight ends with very similar grades. My tight end 4 is Jatavian Sanders out of Texas, and he's a player whose tape was kind of disappointing to me based on what I had heard heading into his evaluation. Now, as a college tight end, he was very good, but based on his NFL projection, Jatavian Sanders was billed as this super explosive elite athlete, and I didn't really see that on tape. I viewed him as a flex tight end with kind of above average speed. He ended up confirming that at the combine with a 4.69 in the 40, which is fine for a tight end, but not really ideal for a 245 pound tight end. And his 30-inch vertical is 8th percentile, which is also pretty concerning. My grade on Jatavian Sanders has stayed the exact same pretty much since I've evaluated him. I'm not going to credit or discredit a player twice for the same thing, but I think the idea of him being a top 50 pick is looking a lot less realistic nowadays. The best thing that Jatavian Sanders brings to the table is his ball skills. He's right up there with Cade Stover as far as just having magnetic hands, catching everything. Didn't have a single drop last year. He's got elite focus at the catch point with defenders draped over him, securing targets in tight windows, and he does a really good job against zone of uncovering and being a quarterback-friendly target, keeping himself available. But again, I think the straight line speed is just average. You see him struggling to pull away from linebackers down the seam. He doesn't have much fluidity or wiggle as a route runner, and he has a hard time powering through physical man coverage. If a defender's pulling on his jersey, it really disrupts his stride and slows him down. And he also isn't very dynamic after the catch. So I view Jatavian Sanders as just a reliable possession tight end, but he's not someone that you want playing in line. He had some nice blocks out on the move against defensive backs, but one-on-one at the point of attack, he just gets uprooted. He doesn't have the lower half strength to hold up as an inline blocker. He also takes poor angles into contact and whiffs on a lot of blocks, and in pass protection, he gets discarded very easily. So Jatavian Sanders is someone where I really just don't see the hype as a top 50 pick. My third ranked tight end is Theo Johnson out of Penn State. One of the best combine performances in this class. I have him with the highest athletic score of any tight end. He's 6'6", 260 pounds with a 39.5-inch vertical, 4.57 in the 40, and I thought he was a good athlete on tape, but I did not see that coming. I think Theo Johnson is someone that can do a little bit of everything at a B to B plus level, but he doesn't really have one go-to trait or skill set. He's got the speed to separate vertically. He can hold up in the run game. He does a good job powering through grabby man coverage. As a route runner, he flashed some of the hip fluidity, I think, to separate in the intermediate game, but his footwork, I think, really limits his separation ability at this point. There's a real lack of precision vision as a route runner. He kind of stumbles into the top of the route, doesn't separate or break cleanly. I think he's someone that can play all 3 downs, and if he refines his route running technique, he could be a 900 yard a year type of receiver. My tight end 2 is Sinnott out of Kansas State. He was another elite tester at the combine, 40-inch vertical, 95th percentile 3-cone, and with Sinnott, you actually do see those elite athletic traits show up on tape. He can snap out of his breaks, make really tight cuts as a route runner. He also does a great job of maximizing his separation with deceptive angles and stems. He can stem away from his break to open up the defender's hips and then cut in the opposite direction. He gives head fakes and shoulder shakes at the top of the route. Against zone coverage, he does a really good job of attacking the defender's blind spot. If he's trying to run a dig route behind a hook defender, he'll quickly get out of his field of vision and then cut back inside, and the defender has no conception of where that route's developing. He can get extra yardage after the catch. For the most part, he has reliable hands, good body control, really impressive ball tracking skills down the sideline on those over-the-shoulder passes, and he doesn't have elite speed, but outside of that, I really like everything that Sinnott brings to the table as a receiver. His size kind of limits what you can ask him to do in the run game, but on slice blocks where he's coming across the formation, he takes really good angles. He lined up all over Kansas State's offense, backfield, slot, in line. He's competitive when he's blocking on the line of scrimmage, but again, more of someone that's going to die slowly than really win those blocks. And my top ranked tight end, surprisingly, is going to be Brock Bowers out of Georgia. Really outside of the limitations as an inline blocker that we've discussed with every sub 250 pound tight end, I think Brock Bowers does everything at a high level. He has straight line speed, he's sudden in and out of breaks, he can change up his route tempo to set up defenders and get them off balance. He has strong and reliable hands. He wasn't as efficient in contested catches last year, but he's got 2 years of tape where he showed elite focus at the catch point, and then he's like a running back after the catch. He's got a ton of different moves to make defenders miss. He can truck people in the open field. He's gonna have to play more of a hybrid role in the NFL because he is 243 pounds, but he's a really good move blocker. He's got great target location in open space. He can pancake linebackers and defensive backs. If he was 255, 260, he has the technique to be one of the better blocking tight ends in the NFL. The size just really caps how effective he can be. And I think just based on how good of a player he is, he's a top 10 player in this class. I have him 12th on my board because I do account for positional value, and it wouldn't surprise me if he falls out of the top 10. But as long as you use him in creative ways and keep him on the field like the Lions did with Sam Laporta, I think he's going to be a productive player as a rookie. And once you get past the top 3 receivers in this class, I think Brock Bowers is the next best pass catching option. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, let me know in the comments any NFL draft prospects that you'd like me to cover. And if you want to see my full draft board as an interactive filterable table, I've got that up at A to Z sports.com. The link to that is in the description.